was now a fact, a battle line which stretched across a continent. There were no flanks to turn, only the curves and convolutions of the rough trenches in which the million-strong armies crouched and waited. Nothing like it had ever been seen before. All the plans had gone awry. All the careful preparation of Germany, all the brave improvisation of the Allies, all the heroism of the soldiers had produced stalemate. The stalemate was universal. In Serbia, where the war began, the same incredible spectacle was seen. On August the 12th, the Austrians entered Serbia on what they took to be a short, punitive campaign, which would swiftly bring down this upstart Slav kingdom to the dust. To the world's astonishment, the Austrian invasion was at once repelled. The Serbs fought with passionate fury against their overwhelming neighbors. But all the weight of numbers was on Austria's side. And after an interval, the Austrians returned in strength and with more caution. This time it seemed that they must win. December the 2nd, they entered Belgrade for the second time. Easy enough. Belgrade was right on the border. But once again, the Serbs made a remarkable rally. By the 15th, the Austrians were out of Belgrade again, and Serbia was cleared of the invaders. The campaign had been brutal and bloody. The Austrians lost 227,000 men, more than half the numbers of their invading forces. This was a war of Austria's making, but Austria was out of luck. The great bulk of the Austrian armies marched to meet the Russians, marched with enthusiasm, believing in the strength of their German allies. Less than 50% of these men were Austrians and Hungarians. The rest, mostly Slavs, had little desire to fight for the Habsburg Empire. Many of these soldiers knew no more German than the 80 basic army words of command. Yet the German victory of Tannenberg in August lent the Austrians hope. Their commander-in-chief, Field Marshal Konrad von Hötzendorf, had visions of a Tannenberg of his own against the Russian southern group of armies. On September the 6th, the main bodies of the Russians and Austrians met around the town of Lemberg. There was bitter fighting. On September the 11th, the day on which Joffre announced his victory on the Marne, Conrad had accepted defeat. His casualties were enormous and included over 100,000 prisoners. The Austrians began a withdrawal, which carried them back over 200 miles. A lasting blow had been struck at Austrian morale. German staff officers cruelly summed it up in the saying, "We are fettered to a corpse." The Germans had reason for bitterness. This Austrian disaster had gravely affected their own plans and prospects, which had been so bright after Tannenberg. Now, as the Russians advanced to the Carpathian Mountains, the Germans had to turn from their own offensives to meet the threat. Their attack on Warsaw came to nothing. In East Prussia, the Russians were even able to mount a new invasion. At the root of all problems in this vast fighting area was communication. General Ludendorff wrote,
"We had great trouble in getting the railway lines, which we had ourselves previously completely destroyed, into working order again. We work now with might and main to restore them. But considerable time elapsed before the railway communications were really in order."
The Russian winter arrived, halting all the armies in their tracks. Germans, Austrians, Russians, they burrowed holes for shelter, struggled to keep warm, and waited for better times. Ludendorff said,
"The 1914 campaign had not brought a decision, and I could not see how one was to be reached in 1915.
In the East, as in the West, it was stalemate. This, too, was going to be a long business." As the weeks slid into months and the months drew towards the ending of the year, shocked nations recognized that this war would not be over by Christmas. In France, tight censorship concealed the full truth of what had happened since the 3rd of August. But in hundreds of thousands of homes, nothing could conceal the loss of a husband, a brother, or a son. 995,000 Frenchmen were killed, wounded, or missing in 1914. Russia's losses had been even greater than the French, and with them, disturbing signs of internal rottenness had appeared. The Russian soldiers had displayed unbelievable devotion, patience, and tenacity. Too often their courage was brought to nothing by blunders, corruption, and heartbreaking shortages. Yet at the end of the year, the Tsar's illusions lingered on.
My dear army, have already given such proofs of valor that victory can't fail us now. We must dictate the peace, and I am determined to continue the war until the Central Powers are destroyed. No Congress or mediation for me.
Britain and Germany settled to their business with implacable wrath. The novelist H.G. Wells voiced their ardor.
Nobody wants to be a non-combatant in a war of this sort.
The desire to serve, to join in the fight, possessed the British people in odd ways. A Times reporter wrote in his diary,
"People seem to be enveloped in a mysterious darkness, haunted by goblins in the form of desperate German spies. The wildest stories are being circulated of outrages committed by Germans in our midst."
Fear of spies and fear of invasion produced hysteria, which turned venomously against Germans and Austrians living in Britain, or against their suspected sympathizers. The first casualty was Lord Haldane, the man who had created the Expeditionary Force and the Territorial Army. Haldane was accused in the newspapers of being secretly pro-German. It was even said that this lifelong bachelor had a German wife. He recalled,
"I was threatened with assault in the street, and I was on occasions in some danger of being shot at."
This violence turned in other directions also. In the East End of London, German shops were attacked and looted. Driven by popular pressure, the government unwillingly rounded up aliens in Britain. The historian F.S. Oliver recorded,
"One of my friends has given away her dachshunds, lest they should lead her to be suspected of spying."
In October, the agitation reached its climax with a campaign against the First Sea Lord, Prince Louis of Battenberg, who, with Winston Churchill, had been responsible for the concentration of the Grand Fleet before war even broke out. The journal John Bull wrote,
Blood is said to be thicker than water, and we doubt whether all the water in the North Sea could obliterate the blood ties between the Battenbergs and the Hohenzollerns when it comes to a question of a life and death struggle between Germany and ourselves.
On October the 30th, Prince Louis resigned. But all these preoccupations were very remote from the urgent needs of the Expeditionary Force. On August the 7th, the Prime Minister requested Parliament to sanction an increase of the army by 500,000 men. The response was immediate and impressive.
War had been declared, and the following Sunday I went with a friend of mine into Shepherd's Bush Empire to see the picture show there, and at the end of the show they showed the